So we have new Impact Wrestling World Tag Team Champions. Yes, we have new champions that were crowned last night at Impact Wrestling Sacrifice, only on the Impact Plus streaming platform. And it is a former IWGP Tag Team Champion winning tag team that have captured the gold, because New Japan Pro Wrestling's rising tag team FinJuice, which of course is Juice Robinson and David Finlay, are now the new Impact World Tag Team Champions after defeating the Good Brothers, Gallows and Karl Anderson, at Impact Wrestling's Sacrifice. Now, of course, this will be the first reign for Robinson and Finlay with these Impact World Tag Team Championships. Now, although the match had a lot of great back and forth action, Robinson and Finlay were able to get the final say on Karl Anderson with a Doomsday Device finisher. The former champions, the Good Brothers, won the titles back at Impact Turning Point in November of 2020. They won it off one of the longest reigning tag team champions in the company's history, the North, Josh Alexander, and now AEW's Ethan Page. Certainly a really surprising outcome. I mean, I really didn't see this one coming. I'll be totally honest with you. I think it's really interesting because, and we'll talk about the obviously the main event, the unification match between Moose and Rich Swann. I think it's really fascinating that when it came to the main event and that World Championship match between Moose and Rich Swann, the finish of that match, the outcome of that match leaked out, gosh, it would have been at least 2-3 weeks ago now, because Sacrifice was filmed and taped during the last run of Impact TV tapings, which was a few weeks ago at this point. So the outcome of Moose versus Rich Swann was leaked out, you said, several weeks ago by of all people, Dave Meltzer, when he was doing his, it was either in the Wrestling Observer newsletter or on Wrestling Observer Live. He reported that Rich Swann had won the match. It was a unification match. At this point, not only had the match not been announced, but the fact that the TNA World Heavyweight Championship was even considered the World Championship, or the unification element, or even the match with Kenny Omega, none of that had been announced. But Dave Meltzer reported that spoiler out. I find it interesting that he reported that about this AEW talent in Kenny Omega and all that kind of stuff, but he didn't report the Impact World Tag Team Championships changing hands too. I find that very, very interesting, and I guess that's maybe part of the reason why I didn't see it coming. But frankly, there are a ton of reasons I didn't see this result coming. First of all, we've seen, obviously, a tag team from another promotion come in and face off against the Good Brothers and lose. That was Private Party, AEW's Private Party. Obviously, they were in Impact Wrestling for a hot minute with Matt Hardy as part of this AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship. They came in, they had the match. Again, no one expected them to win. No one expected them to win that match, and they didn't. And they didn't win that match. The Good Brothers retained. It was a fun match. It was a triple threat tag team match. Chris Sabin and James Storm were actually involved as well. But nevertheless, it was a fun match. But I don't think at any point people thought, maybe, possibly the AEW tag team might win the Impact World Tag Team Championships, but it's unlikely. That would feel unlikely. And that was the same here with FinJuice. I think most people thought, it's the working relationship between Impact Wrestling and New Japan that actually predates the working relationship with AEW. And I think a lot of people just thought it's just going to be a fun match. It's going to be an interpromotional match, two great tag teams, and the match itself was great. But certainly the outcome of Juice Robinson and David Finlay winning the Impact Tag Team Championships opens up a plethora of possibilities that I don't think people thought once were possible. Now, what do I mean by that? Obviously, those reports came out recently about Okada coming to North America and working for either AEW or Impact Wrestling, possibly even both. The fact that you've now got a New Japan Pro Wrestling tag team holding Impact Wrestling gold says to me that this relationship between Impact Wrestling and specifically New Japan, we don't know too much about New Japan's relationship with AEW right now. Of course, you had Kenta appear on Dynamite, and you had Jon Moxley appear on the New Japan Strong show, but we don't know too much about the relationship there. Still might be a bit of friction because of the Kenny Omega stuff and the Young Bucks connection, all that kind of stuff, and the way that they left New Japan, whatever. But what we do know is that Impact Wrestling obviously has a very strong relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and as I mentioned, that opens up a lot of doors. It really does open up a lot of doors, because then you can have the likes of Okada, Jay White, Naito, Minoru Suzuki. Can you imagine him in Impact Wrestling? Minoru Suzuki going up against someone like Sami Callihan or Eddie Edwards in just a bloodbath deathmatch. How great would that be? Or just kicking the hell out of each other. How much fun would that be? It opens up a lot of possibilities. And I find it interesting when it comes to the Good Brothers as well, because I thought, considering that the Good Brothers they're really tied into everything here when it comes to these working relationships with both AEW and New Japan. They're really a constant, aren't they? Because obviously they're contracted talents to Impact Wrestling. They were the Impact Tag Team Champions, but they've also been regularly appearing on AEW Dynamite. I think, was it this coming week, they have the matchup against Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston on the St. Patrick's Day edition of Dynamite. But also we know in their contracts they have the clauses, as many of the AEW talents do, that once they're able to, they can work these New Japan Pro Wrestling dates if and when they pop up. And I think the idea was that once the world starts to open up again and once travel to Japan becomes easier, because of course right now it's not impossible, there's just a quarantine period, and it's a period of time that the Good Brothers really can't afford to lose right now considering how busy they are. There is they have that clause in their contract whereby they can work those big New Japan shows like your Wrestle Kingdoms, like your Dominions, etc. If and when they come up, and if they can work around the Impact Wrestling television dates, which of course they can, because frankly the Impact Wrestling TV dates are actually few and far between. You're looking at maybe 3 or 4 dates per month, but the way they shoot television and shoot pay-per-views. So the Good Brothers actually do have a ton of time really available to them to work New Japan shows and possibly even AEW shows. But the reason I think it was most surprising that the Good Brothers lost those Impact Tag Team Championships last night is because, as I mentioned, they're the focal point. They go everywhere. Obviously, they're going to be an Impact. They've been in AEW a lot, and they're going to be in New Japan a lot once the travel schedule permits them to do so. So that is certainly interesting. Now, obviously, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this going forward, because an argument could be made that possibly, this coming week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, FinJuice drops the Impact Tag Team Championships back to the Good Brothers, and then there's no difference when it comes to the Good Brothers facing Jon Moxley or Eddie Kingston or anything like that on Dynamite this week. They could hold it until they go into maybe Rebellion in April. I could see them doing something like that. An interesting concept, and maybe this is one that's maybe worth considering here, just possibly, is that we know that at Impact Rebellion we've got Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann in the main event, title versus title. Possibly, just possibly, could we see a tag team championship match at Impact Rebellion in April that has the Impact Tag Team Champions FinJuice, New Japan's FinJuice, against the Good Brothers, who of course are contracted to Impact Wrestling, against AEW's Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston? I mean, talk about a major match. Talk about a mega money match. That would be absolutely, ginormous. It would be huge. It would be massive. Not only to have 3 tag teams from 3 separate promotions, of course you've got Impact Wrestling, New Japan, and AEW, but some of the stars that you've got in there, obviously the Good Brothers, Gallows Karl Anderson, massive stars in their own rights. FinJuice, Juice Robinson, David Finlay, rising stars, you could say. Certainly don't have the drawing powers of a Good Brothers or anything like that, but certainly rising names. And then factor in AEW's Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley, one of the biggest pro wrestlers in the world right now, one of the best pro wrestlers arguably over the course of the last 12 months. And then Eddie Kingston, former Impact Wrestling talent, by the way, but also someone that actually patterns a lot of their work over stars in Japan. And just big stars in general. That would be a ginormous match. If it wasn't for a main event of Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann, title versus title, you would argue that that would be the main event for Impact Rebellion. So if they could get those two matches alone on that card in April would be, I can't even think of the superlatives. Monumentous, gargantuan, huge, everything you can imagine. It would be ginormous. So that is certainly interesting. Is that going to happen? I don't know. As I mentioned, I think we could see a situation whereby the Good Brothers win the titles back as soon as Tuesday. We really could see a scenario like that happening. Will we? We don't know at this point. But as I mentioned, it goes to show that Impact Wrestling certainly does have this faith about this relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is very, very interesting. It certainly does open up a plethora of opportunities of people that could come over to Impact Wrestling. As I mentioned, I think I'm probably going to do a video on that actually. I'm going to talk about maybe like the top 5 or maybe top 10 New Japan talents I would love to see come over to Impact Wrestling, given that this working relationship is really in flux right now. I think a possibility as well for the title change is the ratings, because we've seen at this point, every time that Impact does something with another promotion, whether it is AEW or New Japan, the ratings spike that week. The following week, or if it's announced ahead of time, the ratings spike. And I think maybe Impact Wrestling are looking at this going, okay, we, as an audience, we know that we're probably going to have some form of AEW influence on the show. We also know that there's going to be some form of New Japan influence on the show. Where do we find the next big rating? And I think this coming week, purely because of the fallout of everything that happened last night at Sacrifice. I mean, you had, was it 3 titles change hands last night? You had, obviously, the unification match for the Impact World Championship and TNA World Heavyweight Championship. You had the tag team match, and you also had the X Division title match as well. Given everything that happened last night, and this wasn't like a big pay-per-view or anything like that. This was just your monthly Impact Plus event. It also tells fans and people watching at home that didn't watch Impact Sacrifice last night, by the way, if you're not watching these Impact Plus events every single month, you're missing out, because something big is going to happen, just like last night when you had a New Japan tag team win the Impact World Tag Team Championships. That is certainly very, very interesting. As I mentioned, if I was going to pick all of the people to retain or lose their titles last night, I definitely wouldn't have thought the Good Brothers would have lost their titles. They're too integral to everything that's going on right now when it comes to the Impact and AEW working relationship and storyline. Again, there are a couple of reasons as to why they could have done it. Maybe they're building towards a rematch, probably at Impact Rebellion, or possibly on the New Japan Strong show, or possibly even a show in Japan that they're building towards. That's a possibility. I think it might actually also set up the Good Brothers possibly for an AEW World Tag Team Championship opportunity. I actually recently wrote an article for Sportskeeda trying to predict 5 matches we could possibly see at Double or Nothing in May. And one of the matches I said that I think we could see is the Good Brothers challenging the Young Bucks for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. Now, for me, personally, I think the match is bigger if it's hyped up as the AEW World Tag Team Champions versus the Impact Tag Team Champions. Possibly they might just have Impact might feel, the Good Brothers are going to be so focused on being on AEW television recently or in the coming weeks when it comes to this feud, possibly with the Young Bucks or something like that, that maybe we want to get the Impact Tag Team Championships off them briefly so we can actually have someone at home who's going to focus on challenges within Impact Wrestling. To me, that kind of narrative doesn't make a lot of sense. Considering you've got a tag team as big as the Good Brothers, I would argue that the Good Brothers are probably one of the highest paid wrestlers on the roster right now too. Given that the Good Brothers are going around to all of these different shows, whether it is Dynamite, whether it possibly is New Japan in the future, you would hope and you would think that you would actually have them be the tag team champions, because I always say this when it comes to champions, especially when it comes to Impact and possibly Kenny Omega becoming the Impact World Champion in the future. Every time they appear on, say, AEW Dynamite with the Impact Tag Team Championships, they become a walking billboard, essentially, for Impact Wrestling. We're the Impact Tag Team Champion, Impact World Tag Team Champions. Why don't you come and watch Impact Wrestling on a Tuesday? If the Good Brothers are the tag team champions of Impact, that seems like a pretty cool show to watch. Or I like the Good Brothers. I haven't watched Impact Wrestling in a long time. They're the Impact Tag Team Champions. Maybe I should check out Impact Wrestling on Access TV on Tuesday nights. So I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to the theory that they took the titles off them to free them up possibly to do stuff with the Young Bucks. I don't know. Again, I don't know if I really subscribe to that narrative. I think, as I mentioned, I think probably the most likely reasons for FinJuice winning the titles here is probably for the shock factor, first and foremost. Get people talking. We're doing videos about it like this because of it, so that certainly is an indication of it being the right choice. Furthermore, I think it's probably a case of they're building to a rematch at some point, whether that is on a New Japan Strong show, whether that is at Rebellion in April, whether that is a multi-tag team match at Impact Rebellion in April. Possibly we could have New Japan, AEW, and Impact Wrestling tag teams in the same ring at the same time. That certainly is going to be really interesting. I think it might be interesting as well this coming Wednesday, as I mentioned, that the Good Brothers are going to be facing off against Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. Do FinJuice show up there as well? Because if this rivalry spills over into AEW, that would certainly be a good indication that possibly Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston might be coming to Impact in the future, which would certainly be a lot of fun. But I think, and obviously the other thing that it really does open up is the possibilities when it comes to New Japan and Impact Wrestling. Showing that a New Japan tag team was hyped up to come over to Impact as a New Japan tag team. Their contracts haven't expired or anything like that. They're now the Impact Tag Team Champions. What happens if an Okada comes up? What happens if a Kota Ibushi comes over? What happens if a Naito comes over? What happens if a Jay White comes over? The list goes on and on, doesn't it? I saw some of the people in the comments section when we were talking about the title versus title match for Rebellion when it was announced saying, okay, what if Kenny Omega wins that match at Impact Rebellion, becomes the Impact World Champion and the AEW World Champion, etc., etc.? What happens then if, say, I don't know, Kota Ibushi shows up or Okada shows up. Does that match happen in AEW? Does that match happen in Impact Wrestling? Regardless, where it happens, that match is going to be incredible and absolutely phenomenal. So very, very exciting about all the potential that this victory for FinJuice opens up for Impact Wrestling. I don't know if Tony Khan's going to take credit for it this coming week on Impact Wrestling as well, talking about opening the forbidden door. It's certainly going to be interesting, and certainly we're going to be talking about it a lot going forward here on the channel. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on FinJuice becoming the new Impact World Tag Team Champions? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, AEW, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, get the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.